Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're reflecting on a year of podcasting.
Woohoo!
But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was great. I found another... I keep finding book series.
Ooh,
and I love it. I love
that's
when there's a
good.
whole series of them. So this was one I think I mentioned on here before. Mary Robinette Kowal.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and so she had this super cool books that were sort of Jane Austen-y, which I was super into. And then this one I'm reading called Calculating the Stars, which is set in the 50s, and there's a terrible meteorite happens, and they realize they have to get off Earth. And this woman is a physicist, but she's also a woman. But will she get to be an astronaut? And it's super cool. I'm into it.
That sounds awesome.
It's very cool. Alternate history, but I love those kind of books. I don't know if they're actually called a particular genre, because it's not straight out fantasy. Everything's different, but there's just slight differences.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool.
I've never read anything by Mary Robinette Kowal. Is that her name?
Yeah, they're really good.
But I listened to the podcast Writing Excuses, which she is
Right.
one of the hosts of, and I really enjoyed that podcast. So I'll have to read one of those.
Yeah, they're really good. I really like them.
Awesome.
That was cool. So what about you? How was your week?
My week was good. Ralph and I yesterday went to Elk Head Rock, I guess, or Elk Head. It's this really cool place in Trinidad, and the fun thing was that we just went there. We were exploring. We've been exploring cool new, trails and whatnot in the area, and we realized when we got there that years and years ago, before we even thought that we might move to this area, we had gone on a road trip with my parents and brother through here, and we went on that hike. And so we got there and we were like, this kind of looks familiar. And then we kept going. We were like, I think we were here before. And then we realized that 6.5 years ago or whatever, we had gone on this very hike, but we had no idea that it was there.
That is super cool.
So that was fun.
Well, it's weird because way back in the day, 2003, I think, I drove through here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with my family was visiting from Ireland, and we drove through here, and we stayed in this hotel, and then I went on. I'm kind of into the paranormal, but there's a ghost tour in Eureka, and I went on the ghost tour, and this hotel featured heavily in the ghost tour, and we went back and looked at our trip journal, and it had, this hotel is super creepy, so we were we picked up on it then, but little did I know we would be living here going on the ghost tour. So yeah, that's cool though.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was really fun to be like, wait a minute, this is the spot. So
that's awesome. Is this deja vu or has this actually really happened before? So yeah. Cool. So tell me, do you have a quote for us this week?
Oh, I do. So this is Derek Sivers, who writes really pithy and spot-on thoughts about all kinds of things. So, people have different preferences in different parts of their lives. You have to know your preferences well because no matter what you do, someone will tell you you're wrong. Some careers come with excuses. The quiet librarian, the flaky artist, no explanation needed. But when you go against the stereotype, people get confused. The entrepreneur who's not into money, the musician who avoids crowds. If you expect criticism in advance and take pride in your unusual stance, you can bash on with a smile, being who you want to be. Then, every time they say you're wrong, it's a sign you're doing it right.
Dude.
And I thought that was cool. And, I was thinking about what are stereotypes of professors, and there's, ditzy, absent-minded professors with piles of stuff on their desk. So that's one. But anything that we might want to be. It's cool to think about.
I think we talked about this a lot on here too, the kind of workaholic. And always any spare moment should be given over, that kind of thing. That's the one I feel really a lot of stress about not fulfilling.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I like having that encapsulated into that. That's
totally.
Cool.
Me too.
Cool. So today we're celebrating, because this is our 52nd episode of weekly episodes. So here we are a year later.
Yeah. So we wanted to take this episode to kind of look back and look forward. And I wanted to start, I looked up what our most listened to episode was, and it was episode 16, Virtual Teaching, closely followed by episode 39, which was our interview with Moses Rifkin and Johan Tabora on the underrepresentation curriculum. So that was kind of cool to see how that all shook out.
That's awesome. I mean, and it is really interesting when you think when we started this, we had no idea. It was back before when we had no idea that we would be teaching online and figuring that out.
Right.
Like live.
Exactly.
Sort of. So, yeah.
This was actually a great time to be extra reflective with this podcast. So
this week I found a little tricky thinking about what's working well and what's working on. But I guess maybe just things that have been good.
Okay.
Is kind of
so
what
yeah.
I thought about.
So what did you come up with? What's working for you with our year of podcasting?
Well, I think I'm kind of amazed at our persistence.
Oh, yes.
Of kind of getting through, because I really definitely struggled with the transition to being online, and I just didn't think it was going to, like, we were going to figure it out, or like I would have the bandwidth or something. And it's actually just been super beneficial for me to keep going. And so I really feel a lot like proud that we managed to make that kind of keep going.
Awesome.
And push through. And I think I've learned a lot about myself, because every time, like often when you suggest a topic, I'm like, I'm not going to really have much to say about that. And then of course I always have a lot to say. Not always positive, but you know, there's always a lot. But, so I think I've been surprised by that. And I feel very joyful at the connection. Like when we it's been really nice with you and me getting to spend more time together. But also hearing from people and emails that they like listen, and just super wonderful. So I really like that.
So wonderful to hear from listeners. I agree.
And then, sorry, I have more.
Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
The other thing that's so weird is like, this is like a really strange time capsule. Like for me, episode 9 feels very, it's so weird. Like that was the adapting one, when it's like we've just realized. Yeah. And that to me is super strange, to have that kind of moment in time sort of encapsulated. And it's just really strange to kind of listen back and see where my head was at then. And that's super interesting.
We've kind of talked about how long ago episode 9 was, which is when we switched and started talking about virtual teaching. And we have had a lot of episodes since then, and not very many before, actually. And that is really remarkable to know when that happened. Yeah.
And it's funny, you know, the bit at the beginning where we sort of chat about our week, it's almost like this strange journal to kind of have that recorded. And so that's cool. And I think one of the highlights for me was definitely interviewing Moses and Johan. That was super cool.
That was awesome.
I'm excited about the prospect of doing more interviews. That was awesome.
Me too.
Yeah. So tell me, what about you?
So I was looking back over our episodes to see which one stood out to me. And one stood out to me was episode 7, which was Essentialism, which is a book by Greg McKeown about intentionally picking what things you're going to do and being essential and only doing those things and saying no to the other things. And I was surprised at what an early episode that was, because I still think about it all the time. And it was so helpful to reflect on it back then, and I'm still reflecting on what I actually want to spend my time on and actively choosing to do that. So it was really cool to see how early an episode that was, and that it's been that long that this has been something on my mind. So that was cool.
Super, and it like kind of even became more relevant, right? When we suddenly,
that's true,
everything is happening all at the exact same time, and trying to filter those things down. Like I feel like that's the essentialism stuff is almost the theme of the whole year of the podcasting. Like it comes up time and time again of like, what do you really want to be doing? And then
pick it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another one that stood out to me was episode 36, Off the Wall Questions, which I just really enjoy that topic, because at any lecture, at any point in the lecture, an off-the-wall question could happen. And so it's just something that's continually there. And, I just find it helpful to have reflected on it and to have some ideas of what to do in that situation so that I can be a little less nervous about it.
Well, and like 80% of like the magic for me is you being like, oh yeah, that's a thing for me too. Because it's like most of the time you think it's just you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I can't handle. But yeah.
Yeah. It seems like, oh, I should be able to handle this off the wall question. And of course we do, but it's good to know that other people also don't know how to handle it instantly.
Totally.
And then I think maybe the highlight for me of the whole year is episode 32, Life Outside Being a Professor, when you were talking about running into a student unexpectedly at the grocery line.
Recently, I ran into a student in line at the grocery store, the co-op.
Uh-huh.
And I was like talking to her, and like it was totally great, but it was just, there's always this added, oh, I thought I was just going to the store and now I'm kind of like interacting with the student. And I ended up basically like stealing this chicken because I was talking to her somehow. Instead of like putting the chicken on the like thing to go through, I just picked it up and put it in my like bag. And then the lady was like, are you going to pay for that? And I was like, oh, sure, yeah. Like the student was just like, are you okay? And it was just so embarrassing.
Goodness. That's hilarious.
I'm so glad I shared.
I went back and listened to that segment earlier today and tears were streaming down my face because that was just so relatable and hilarious. And you said something right before telling that story about how you thought you were just going to the grocery store. You didn't realize you were going to have to interact with a student, and that surprise and throwing you off was why you accidentally almost stole a chicken, which is so relatable because I've been there too, you know?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from our listeners if anyone has stolen
Oh my gosh.
anything.
Tell us your funny stories about
stealing.
running into students unexpectedly. Yeah. I want to hear them all.
Well, I don't know if we've ever discussed the origin of the podcast on the podcast and how we got delayed somewhere. Was it in Denver?
I thought it was in Arcata, but I don't know.
I can't remember. I think it was Denver going back to Arcata.
Okay, so we ran into each other in the airport and we were delayed waiting for a flight.
Because flights are always delayed to where we live.
Yeah, because it's very foggy, no visibility. So tell the story, Ruth.
Well, so yeah, and I think we ended up just chatting, and I think I had been listening to a lot of podcasts on the flight, and we were chatting about how this would be a cool idea for a podcast. And then many months later, you brought it up again. And I was like, what an amazing idea. And you were like, yeah, we've actually already talked about this and I had forgotten. So yeah, you could.
And it was the three of us. It was you, me, and Ralph all in the airport. And we were like, that's actually a good idea.
Yeah. So plane delays. Who knew?
Yeah.
That's where the magic happens.
There you go.
Yes. So yeah.
So what are you working on?
I think some things like that, like I could do with working on is, one, I don't really know how to engage with social media properly. And so that is a thing that I don't know if I really want to, but I can understand that it might do good for outreach sort of purposes.
Sure.
And it's just so exciting when people email, and I wonder if like sometimes it's a big activation barrier for someone to send an email. So that's one thing. I think building like the community of listeners would be really interesting to do. And I think the other thing I'm super interested in is the possibility of other projects, like maybe doing a workshop with listeners, and we could get together and chat about professoring. So that would be
sounds
something.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think like obviously with like time commitments and stuff, it's such a kick when you hear from people. So I would like more to do some stuff to kind of generate more of that.
And there's so many cool ideas out there to get some discussion going, you know? So a lot of the times the emails that we get have some idea related to what we said, and it'd be great to make that back and forth a little bit more, you know?
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome. I love it.
Cool. So what about you? What are you working on?
I'm working on more interviews. I really enjoyed interviewing Moses and Johan, and I'm looking forward to recording with my all-time favorite professor from when I was an undergraduate, Rachel Austin, who we have on the books. And I'm really looking forward to broadening out more to a wide range of people that we could interview. And I'm really interested in who our listeners would like us to interview.
Ooh, good question.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations of people to bring on the podcast? And it could be anybody, including other podcasters? Do you listen to other podcasts that would be similar and we could exchange some ideas? I think that would be, I would love to hear about that. So any recommendations you guys have, send them our way.
Oh, yes, please. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. And can we ask your mentor, like, if she has any funny stories about you as an undergrad, or is that like,
we'll give her a prep to think about that in advance? No, I don't think we need to do that.
That's, yeah. Yeah. I was at, there was a teaching and learning, like the Center for Teaching and Learning was sort of hosting some professional development for people. And I was at one of them and we were on a panel talking about like what things worked and kind of like the podcast, like what didn't work so well. But suddenly someone chimed in from the audience about another professor, like, oh, I was in her class.
Oh, cool.
And was kind of giving a live review of the class. And it was all really positive, but I was like, oh my God, like I would just, my face would be on fire right now. Like I might actually pass out if that's happened. Just surprise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I won't ask. The theme of that is I'm not going to ask someone
okay,
to tell
thanks. I
embarrassing
appreciate
stories
that.
about you. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, but it's super weird. It's definitely, if you said, not this time last year, because we were actually making a podcast this time last year, but if you said just a little bit sooner than this time last year that we would have recorded a year of a podcast, I would never have believed it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super excited that we have this many episodes and we have listeners and have awesome discussions going. So I'm thrilled and can't wait to keep going next year.
Yeah, well, and it really works as a reflection thing, because there's a couple of times I've listened back to an episode to like write the blurb that goes with it, and I've kind of like, oh, I did say that, I should write that down, like I do want this, you know.
Oh yes,
and
actually doing the things that we're coming up with. Totally. Yeah. I know what you mean. And that was a cool thing too about looking back over previous episodes just now. Remembering those kind of ideas. Oh, I was thinking about that back then. This thing I'm still applying and this thing I'd kind of forgotten about. So let me remember that, you know, so that was awesome.
Yeah. And I really appreciate too, like the kind of universality, is that a word? The kind of common things that seem to crop up for people.
Yes.
Because we get a lot of emails from people in completely different disciplines. And there's just so many common threads.
Yeah.
Throughout that we all experience, and I think that's super cool.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I think I didn't totally anticipate that. Like I thought, like our experiences might only be relevant to specifically
STEM teaching focused faculty members. Yeah, very specific, but it turns out, and I mean, even beyond academia, everybody needs to figure out how to be productive and how to do what they want to do and be intentional. So it is really amazing how broad the challenges and techniques that we come up with in our disciplines apply elsewhere.
Yeah, and I honestly think, I was thinking about this, I don't think I would have put in the early tenure packet if it weren't for the podcast. Yeah, like even, you know, the first episode we did about it, it kind of got my wheels churning about like, what did I want to set up? Like, how did I want to have it set up so that it would end up not being a big scramble at the end? And of course it did end up being a big scramble at the end, but like it was slightly less so. But it was kind of, I don't know, it's spaced out thinking about it. And the fact that we kept kind of checking in on it definitely got me there. And then announcing that you're going to do it even
live on the podcast, sure.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone would email and be like, you said you were going to go up and you didn't go, but you know, still it felt like
you changed your mind, Ruth.
Yeah. I know, like you broke her trust. But yeah.
I guess the last thing I'd like to say is, if listeners, we're working on new topics for the new year, and if you have topics you'd like to hear about, please send them our way. We have a cool list, and we are always looking for things to add to it. So let us know what you think.
Yeah. And always the emails do just make us very happy. So
yeah, that's also true.
Yes. Cool.
All right.
Cool. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.